Imagine holding $1 billion in your hand, only to watch it vanish into thin air because of one line of bad code. That is exactly what happened to Silas Kincaid, the most dangerous man in Chicago. His empire was crumbling, his tech team was useless, and a gun was already on the table. But here's the twist. The person who saved his life wasn't a hacker, a soldier, or a spy. It was the girl cleaning the trash can in the corner. This is the story of how a janitor brought the mafia to its knees, fixed the unfixable, and stole the boss's heart in the process. You are not ready for this. The Kincaid Tower didn't look like a fortress of organized crime. It looked like a monument to capitalism. 60 stories of steel and glass piercing the gray Chicago sky. To the public, it was the headquarters of Kincaid Logistics, a shipping empire moving freight across the Midwest. To the federal agencies, constantly trying to tap its phone lines, it was the central nervous system of the Kincaid crime family. Rowan O'Neill knew better than to look at the men in the suits. That was rule number 1 of being a janitor on the executive floor. Be invisible. "Miss O'Neill!" Rowan froze, her grip tightening on the handle of her mop. She didn't look up immediately. She counted to 3, forcing her breathing to remain shallow and calm. She turned, keeping her eyes lowered to the polished Italian leather shoes of the man speaking. "Yes, Mr. Henderson?" she asked, her voice raspy. She barely used it these days. Henderson was the floor manager, a petty tyrant who feared the men in the big offices and took it out on the cleaning staff. "You missed a spot near the server room doors. Mr. Kincaid is expecting guests. If he sees dust, I don't get fired, Rowan. You disappear. Do you understand?" "I understand," Rowan said, nodding submissively. "I'll get it right away." She watched Henderson waddle away before dragging her bucket toward the double doors at the end of the hall. The sign read, "Data Center. Authorized personnel only." Rowan wasn't supposed to know what happened in there. She wasn't supposed to know that Kincaid Logistics was a front for washing money through a complex cryptocurrency tumbler known as the Hydra. She wasn't supposed to know that the code running it was sloppy, written by arrogant Ivy League dropouts who thought they were gods because they knew Python. She dipped her mop into the grey water. The smell of bleach stung her nose, a scent that had become her armor. 3 years ago, Rowan O'Neill had been someone else. She had been Rogue, a cybersecurity contractor for the NSA, with a master's from MIT and a bounty on her head from the Russian Bratva, after she accidentally stumbled into a human trafficking ring's digital ledger. She had exposed them, but the cost had been her life. Her fiancé was dead. Her identity was burned. She had run to Chicago, taken a cash-only job, and buried her genius under baggy grey coveralls and a messy bun. Now she scrubbed floors for Silas Kincaid. Speak of the devil. The elevator doors at the far end of the corridor chimed. The air pressure in the hallway seemed to drop. 4 men stepped out. In the center was Silas Kincaid. He was terrifyingly handsome, in the way a wolf is beautiful right before it tears your throat out. He was tall, wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than Rowan made in 5 years. His hair was dark, swept back, and his eyes were the color of frozen whiskey. He didn't walk. He stalked. Rowan immediately turned her back, aggressively scrubbing a non-existent stain on the marble. "Are we ready, Preston?" Silas's voice was a low baritone that vibrated through the hallway. Preston, the head of IT, was scurrying beside him, sweating through his shirt. "Yes, sir. The transaction is set for 12:00 p.m. The encrypted tunnel is stable. The cartel representatives in Mexico are on standby." "This is $50 million, Preston," Silas said, stopping right next to where Rowan was working. He didn't even glance at her. To him, she was furniture. If this transfer lags, if it glitches, if the feds get even a whiff of the IP address, it's bulletproof, Mr. Kincaid, Preston squeaked. My team has been up for 48 hours. Good, Silas said. He adjusted his cufflinks. Because Coletti is looking for a weakness. If the system fails, we look weak. And you know what happens to weak things in this city. Silas walked past Rowan, the scent of expensive sandalwood and gun oil trailing behind him. He entered the server room, his entourage following. The heavy doors clicked shut. Rowan let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She looked at the digital watch on her wrist. 11:55 a.m. She had a bad feeling. She had seen Preston's team working earlier. They were sloppy. They relied on outdated firewalls, and their SSL certificates were managed by a third party that had been compromised 2 weeks ago. She had wanted to leave an anonymous note, but that would risk exposure. Not my circus. Not my monkeys, she told herself. Just clean the floor, Rowan. Just survive. But as she squeezed the mop water out, the red light above the server room door flickered. Then a muffled shout came from inside. Then a crash. Rowan hesitated. The smart thing to do was run. The janitor isn't supposed to be there when the Mafia Boss loses his temper. But curiosity, her old fatal flaw, rooted her to the spot. Inside the war room, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to apocalyptic in the span of 30 seconds. Silas Kincaid stood at the head of the massive glass table, his hands resting flat on the surface. He was staring at the wall of monitors that covered the north side of the room. Usually, they displayed cascading streams of green data, the heartbeat of the Hydra protocol. Now, the screens were flashing a bright, mocking crimson. Error 503, gateway timeout, ledger synchronization failed, packet loss 100%. Fix it, Silas said. His voice wasn't loud, it was deadly quiet. Preston was typing furiously on his laptop, his fingers trembling so hard he kept hitting the wrong keys. 3 other junior developers were scrambling around the server racks, checking cables that didn't need checking. I don't understand, Preston stammered. The tunnel collapsed. The encryption keys aren't matching. The money is stuck in limbo, sir. It's left our accounts, but it hasn't hit the destination. Where is the money, Preston? Silas asked, unbuttoning his suit jacket. It's in the ether. If we don't re-establish the handshake in... Preston looked at the timer on the screen. Oh, God. 6 minutes. If we don't re-establish in 6 minutes, the blockchain reverts. The transaction cancels. And the feds? The failsafe triggers a suspicious activity report automatically if a transaction of this size fails. Silas pulled a Sig Sauer P226 from his waistband and set it on the table with a heavy metallic clunk. The typing in the room stopped instantly. You have 5 minutes and 50 seconds to save your lives, Silas said. The cartel is on the phone. They are waiting for confirmation. If I have to tell them we lost $50 million because you forgot to carry a 1, I am going to shoot you, Preston. And then I am going to shoot the computers. It's a DDoS attack, one of the junior devs yelled. Someone is flooding the port. Block it, Preston screamed. Reroute the traffic. I can't. The command line is locked. It's a loop. It keeps rewriting itself. Silas watched the chaos with cold detachment. He knew men. He knew violence. He knew leverage. But he didn't know code. He was helpless, and he hated it. He felt the familiar coil of rage tightening in his chest. This was Victor Coletti's work. It had to be. A sabotage at the critical moment. 0430 remaining. Sir, we're locked out, Preston sobbed. The system thinks we are the intruders. It's the autoimmune protocol. I can't stop it. Silas picked up the gun. He checked the chamber. Then you are useless to me. The door to the server room creaked open. Silas spun around, raising the weapon reflexively, the barrel leveled at the intruder. It wasn't an assassin. It wasn't the FBI. It was the janitor, the girl with the messy bun and the grey coveralls. She was holding a mop bucket in one hand and a spray bottle in the other. Her eyes were wide, staring at the gun, but she didn't flinch. "Get out," Silas snarled. "Get out or die." "You're doing it wrong," the girl said. Her voice was quiet, raspy, but it cut through the panic in the room like a knife. Silas blinked. "Excuse me?" Rowan swallowed hard. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She shouldn't be here. This was suicide, but she couldn't watch code that bad destroy a system. It was a compulsion. "The lockout," Rowan said, stepping fully into the room, ignoring the gun pointed at her chest. "It's not a DDoS attack. It's a syntax loop in your handshake protocol. You're trying to force the traffic through port 80, but the update you ran this morning closed it. You need to route through port 443 and bypass the SSL verification manually." Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Preston looked up, sweat dripping off his nose. "What the hell is the cleaning lady talking about?" "She's talking about saving your ass," Silas said slowly, lowering the gun an inch. He looked at Rowan, really looked at her for the first time. Beneath the baggy clothes and the grime, she had eyes that burned with intelligence. "You understand this system?" "I understand that you have 3 minutes before your money is flagged by the IRS," Rowan said. She dropped the mop bucket. It clanged loudly. "Move!" She walked toward the main terminal. "Don't let her touch it!" Preston shrieked. "She's a spy. She'll wipe the servers." Rowan didn't wait for permission. She shoved Preston out of his chair. He tumbled to the floor in a heap. She sat down, her fingers hovering over the mechanical keyboard. "If she destroys it," Silas said, walking up behind her and placing the cold muzzle of the gun against the back of her chair, "I kill her first. Then you." Rowan didn't look back. "If I fix it, I want a raise." She cracked her knuckles. "Ora 2245 remaining." The screen was a blur of cascading red text. Rowan didn't use the mouse. She opened the terminal command line, her fingers flying across the keys at a speed that made the junior developers gasp. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound was rhythmic, aggressive. "Currently the system is rejecting the keys," Rowan muttered to herself, her janitor persona falling away, revealing the MIT hacker underneath. "You idiots hard-coded the timestamp. Rookie mistake." "Sudo kill, 9 PID 45544. Reroute, force, port 4443. Bypass, auth token. True." "She's using Linux commands on a Windows server," one of the devs whispered. "That's impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Rowan snapped. "It's just a shell wrapper. Shut up." 001 Ojoao's remaining. "It's not accepting the handshake," Rowan hissed. "The firewall is too aggressive." 50 seconds, Silas said. His voice was right by her ear. She could feel his heat. It was distracting, terrifying. "Do it." "I have to drop the shields," Rowan said, finally looking up at the reflection of Silas in the monitor. "To let the money in, I have to lower the firewall for 10 seconds. You'll be vulnerable. If Coletti is watching, he can see us." "Do it," Silas commanded. "I'll deal with Coletti. Save the money." Rowan hit enter. The screen went black. For 3 agonizing seconds, the room was dead. No hum of drives, no flashing lights. Preston whimpered. "She killed it. We're dead." Then, a single line of green text appeared. "Connection established. Transfer complete. Assets secured." The red lights turned to a soothing, steady blue. Rowan slumped back in the chair, her hands shaking uncontrollably now that the adrenaline was fading. She exhaled. The room was silent again. but the texture of the silence was different. It wasn't panic anymore. It was awe and fear. Rowan slowly stood up. She grabbed her mop bucket. I should get back to the hallway. Floor's not going to clean itself. She turned to leave, keeping her head down. Stop! Silas Kincaid's voice was like a whip. Rowan froze near the door. Preston, Silas said, not taking his eyes off Rowan's back. Yes, sir. You're fired. Silas waved his hand dismissively. Get out. If I see you in Chicago by sunset, you're dead. Preston didn't argue. He scrambled out the door, followed by his team. Now it was just the Mafia Don and the Janitor. Silas walked slowly toward her. He circled her, like a predator inspecting a new curiosity. He stopped in front of her, forcing her to look up. Who are you? He asked softly. Just the janitor, sir. Rowan. Janitors don't know how to bypass a militarized SSL handshake, Rowan, Silas said. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. It sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. Who are you really? I'm nobody, she whispered. Nobody just saved me $50 million, Silas said. He leaned in closer. You're not cleaning floors anymore, Rowan. You belong to me now. Rowan didn't go home that night. She didn't go back to her tiny, mouldy studio apartment in the South Loop, and she certainly didn't go back to the janitorial closet to hang up her coveralls. Instead, she found herself sitting in a leather chair in the back of a black armored SUV, speeding through the rainy streets of Chicago. Beside her sat Silas Kincaid, reading a dossier on a tablet. He hadn't spoken a word since they left the tower. The silence was suffocating. Rowan stared out the tinted window, her mind racing through escape plans. Plan A. Tuck and roll at the next stoplight. No, the doors were child-locked. Plan B. Disable the electronic lock system via the car's Bluetooth. Possible, but she didn't have a laptop, only her cheap burner phone, and Silas was watching her reflection in the glass. Your name is Rowan O'Neill, Silas said suddenly, not looking up from his screen. According to your employee file, you're 26, high school diploma from a public school in Ohio. No college. Previous employment, waitress at a diner in Gary, Indiana, and a housekeeper at the Motel 6 off I-90. He finally looked at her. His eyes were predatory, dissecting her. That's a very boring life for a woman who types 70 words a minute and knows Unix command lines better than my MIT graduate. Rowan kept her face neutral. I read a lot. Libraries are free, Mr. Kincaid. Silas chuckled, a low, dry sound. Libraries don't teach you how to bypass a firewall with a 10-second kill switch. That comes from experience. Illegal experience. The car slowed down, turning into the underground garage of a heavily fortified penthouse building in the Gold Coast district. Where are we going? Rowan asked, her voice tight. My home, Silas said. Or, as of tonight, your office. I can't go to your home. I have a cat. I have a life. Your cat will be collected by my staff. Your life as a janitor is over. The car stopped. Silas leaned in, his face inches from hers. The smell of his cologne, sandalwood and danger, filled the small space. You saw the accounts, Rowan. You saw the routing numbers. You know how the Kincaid family moves its money. Do you think I can let you walk out the door and scrub toilets at a Starbucks now? You are a liability. I am turning you into an asset. He opened the door and stepped out, expecting her to follow. She did. She had no choice. The penthouse was a fortress of luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan, but Rowan noticed the glass was 3 inches thick, ballistic grade. There were guards at the elevator and the stairwell. It wasn't a home, it was a high-end prison. Silas led her to a room that looked like a NASA control center. Monitors lined the walls, servers hummed in a cooling rack in the corner, and a desk made of reclaimed oak sat in the center. "This was Preston's remote station," Silas said. "He won't be needing it." "Sit." Rowan hesitated, then sat in the ergonomic chair. It was infinitely more comfortable than the plastic stool she used in the basement. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to hunt," Silas said, walking to a sidebar and pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. He slid one across the desk to her. "Someone tried to crash my system today. Preston thought it was a DDoS attack. You said it was a syntax loop. That means someone didn't just attack from the outside. They tampered with the code from the inside before the update." Rowan's eyes widened. She took the glass, needing the whiskey to steady her nerves. "You have a mole." "Exactly. And you're going to find them." Silas took a sip, watching her over the rim of his glass. "You have full administrative access. Read the emails. Check the logs. Find the rat. If you do, you live, and you get paid more money in a week than you made in 5 years of mopping floors. If you try to run, or if you lie to me." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "I need a different laptop," Rowan said, her voice shifting back to her professional, argué persona. "This one has Preston's grease on it, and I need a specific Linux distro installed, Kali or Porret OS." Silas smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had seen on him. It transformed his face from terrifying to devastatingly attractive. "Make a list. Arthur will get you whatever you need." "Who is Arthur?" "Arthur Penhaligon, my underboss. He handles the wet work. You handle the digital work." Silas walked to the door. "Get comfortable, Rowan. I ordered dinner. Lobster thermidor. It beats whatever was in your lunch pail." "Mr. Kincaid?" Rowan called out before he left. He paused. "Silas." "Silas. Why do you trust me? I could be the mole." Silas looked at her, his expression darkening. "You're not the mole. The mole wanted the transaction to fail. You saved it. But you are hiding something. And I enjoy solving puzzles." He closed the door. Rowan waited 10 seconds, then spun the chair around to the monitors. She cracked her knuckles. "Okay," she whispered to the empty room. "Let's see how dirty your laundry really is, Silas." She didn't start hunting the mole immediately. First, she set up a dead man's switch. She wrote a script that would ping a remote server every 12 hours. If she didn't enter a password, it would dump the encrypted contents of Kincaid's hard drive to the FBI. It was her insurance policy. Then she started digging. What she found wasn't just a mole. It was a war declaration. 3 days passed. Rowan barely slept. She lived on espresso and the gourmet meals Silas's personal chef slid under the door. She had transformed the sleek office into a nest of wires, hard drives, and sticky notes. She had also transformed herself. The janitor's uniform was gone. Silas had arranged for a wardrobe to be delivered. Silk blouses, tailored slacks, cashmere cardigans. Rowan felt like a doll he was dressing up, but she couldn't deny the clothes were armor. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a shadow of the woman she used to be, capable, sharp, dangerous. On the evening of the 3rd day, the door opened. Silas walked in, looking exhausted. He had been dealing with the fallout of the failed transaction with the cartel, smoothing over ruffled feathers. He loosened his tie and sat on the edge of her desk. "Report," he said. Rowan spun a monitor around. It wasn't Preston. He was incompetent, but he wasn't malicious. The code injection came from a terminal on the 40th floor. Accounting. Accounting? Silas frowned. Who? A junior auditor named Greg Miller. But here's the kicker. Greg Miller doesn't exist. The ID was forged. The employee was hired 3 months ago without a background check because he was recommended by a VP. Which VP? Silas's voice dropped an octave. Thomas O'Malley. Silas went still. Thomas O'Malley was his father's oldest friend, a man who had bounced Silas on his knee, a Kappa regime in the family for 30 years. You're wrong, Silas said quietly. The digital footprint doesn't lie, Silas, Rowan said, standing up. She was exhausted, her eyes burning, and she had no patience for his denial. O'Malley authorized the hire. He overrode the security protocols. And look at this. She pulled up a bank ledger. 2 days before the system crash, O'Malley's offshore account in the Caymans received a deposit of $2 million. The source? Shell companies linked to the Coletti family. Silas stared at the screen. The betrayal was absolute. Victor Coletti, the rival Don of the South Side, had bought one of his top men. Silas stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. Get your coat. What? Why? We're going to the warehouse district. O'Malley is overseeing a shipment tonight. I'm going to look him in the eye and ask him why he sold me out. I'm not going, Rowan said, stepping back. I'm the tech guy. I stay in the chair. That's the deal. The deal changed, Silas said, grabbing his jacket. If O'Malley has compromised the system, he might have digital traps waiting for us. I need you on the ground to override security locks if we get pinned down. You're coming. I don't have a gun. I have plenty, Silas said. He tossed her a heavy Kevlar vest. Put this on under your sweater. The warehouse was a cavernous structure near the docks, smelling of rust and salt water. Rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof. Silas parked the SUV a block away. He, Arthur Penhaligon, a massive man who looked like he wrestled bears for fun, and 2 other enforcers moved toward the entrance. Rowan trailed behind them, clutching a tablet to her chest like a shield. Stay behind, Arthur, Silas ordered her. If shooting starts, get flat. They entered through a side door. Rowan hacked in 30 seconds using a keypad spoofer. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit. In the center, surrounded by crates of imported olive oil, which Rowan knew were actually Glock 19 parts, stood Thomas O'Malley. He was an older man with white hair and a kind face. He was smiling at a worker. Silas stepped into the light. Hello, Tom. O'Malley froze. The color drained from his face. Silas, I wasn't expecting you. I know, Silas said, walking closer. His footsteps echoed. You were expecting the system to crash. You were expecting me to be busy fighting the feds so the Coletti trucks could roll in here and steal my inventory. O'Malley's hand drifted toward his coat pocket. Don't, Arthur grunted, raising a shotgun. Why, Tom? Silas asked, pain visible in his eyes. For $2 million? That's it? That's the price of loyalty. It wasn't about the money, Silas, O'Malley shouted, his voice cracking. It's about stability. You're reckless. You're moving into crypto, into tech. You're forgetting the old ways. Coletti promised peace. Coletti promised you a grave, Silas said. Suddenly, the floodlights on the ceiling snapped off. The warehouse plunged into total darkness. Ambush! Arthur roared. Muzzle flashes erupted from the catwalks above. It was a trap. O'Malley was the bait. Bullets pinged off the metal crates. Silas tackled Rowan, throwing her behind a forklift. Stay down! I can't see anything! Rowan yelled. They have night vision! Silas fired blindly into the dark. They cut the power! Rowan scrambled to her knees, opening her tablet. The screen glowed, illuminating her face. A target. A bullet whizzed past her ear, severing a lock of hair. Turn that off! Silas screamed, pulling her down. I can turn the lights back on, Rowan shouted back. The warehouse is on a smart grid. Give me 10 seconds. Cover her. Silas yelled to Arthur. Rowan's fingers flew across the touch screen. She accessed the local grid control. It was encrypted. Standard industrial firewall. Easy. She bypassed it, found the lighting control protocols, and executed a command. But she didn't just turn the lights on. She overloaded the transformers. Boom! A massive spark shower erupted from the ceiling fixtures, raining sparks down on the gunmen on the catwalks like fireworks. The main floodlight surged to 200% brightness, blinding white. The gunmen screamed, shielding their eyes. Their night vision goggles flared out, blinding them temporarily. "Now!" Rowan yelled. Silas and Arthur didn't hesitate. With the attackers blinded and disoriented, they returned fire with ruthless precision. In seconds, the shooting stopped. Bodies fell from the catwalks. Silas stood up, breathing hard, his gun smoking. He walked over to where O'Malley was cowering behind a crate. Silas didn't say a word. He just looked at him. "Silas, please," O'Malley begged. Silas turned his back. "Arthur, handle it." He walked over to Rowan. She was shaking, clutching the tablet. Her cheek was bleeding from a graze where a piece of metal shrapnel had hit her. Silas holstered his gun. He reached out, taking her face in his hands. His thumbs brushed away the blood. "You did good," he whispered. His adrenaline was high, his pupils dilated. He looked at her, not as an employee, but as a partner, a survivor. I hacked the grid," Rowan stammered. "I overloaded the capacitor." "You were brilliant." Silas leaned his forehead against hers. "You saved my life. Again." For a moment, in the middle of the carnage, the air between them crackled with something more dangerous than electricity. Silas looked at her lips. Rowan's breath hitched. Then Arthur's voice broke the spell. "Boss, we need to move. The cops will be here in 5. Silas pulled back, his mask of command sliding back into place. "Let's go. Rowan, get in the car." As they ran to the SUV, Rowan felt a cold knot in her stomach. To overload the grid so quickly, she had used a specific piece of code, a signature script she had written years ago at the NSA. It was called the Blackout Worm. It was a signature, a fingerprint. If anyone was listening, the FBI, the CIA, or worse, they just heard Arwog speak for the first time in 3 years. The high following the warehouse shootout lasted less than 24 hours. Back at the penthouse, the atmosphere had shifted. Silas was no longer just the boss. He was something else. He lingered in her office. He brought her coffee himself. He watched her work with an intensity that made her skin prickle. But Rowan was distracted. She was scrubbing the logs of the warehouse hack, trying to erase her footprint. But she knew it might be too late. Her fears were confirmed the next morning. She was in the kitchen making toast when she heard Silas shouting in the main living area. "I don't care what the Bratva says. Tell them to go to hell." Rowan froze. Bratva, the Russian mob, the people who had put the bounty on her head. She crept toward the hallway. Silas was on the phone, pacing. Arthur stood nearby, looking grim. "They traced a signal?" Silas demanded into the phone. "What kind of signal? A blackout worm? And they traced it to my sector?" Rowan's blood turned to ice. They found her. Silas listened for a moment, his face growing harder. "Send me the file, now." He hung up. He looked at Arthur. "The Russians say they picked up a digital signature last night during the warehouse spike. It matches a cyber terrorist they've been hunting for 3 years. A ghost named Orge." Arthur frowned. "Orge? The one who leaked the Kremlin's human trafficking ledger? I thought she was dead." "So did everyone," Silas said. He looked down at his phone as a file downloaded. He opened it. It was a picture. Rowan held her breath. It would be her old ID photo. Silas stared at the image. Then, slowly, he lifted his head and looked directly at the hallway where Rowan was hiding. He knew she was there. "Rowan," he said. His voice was devoid of warmth. "Come here." Rowan stepped out. There was no point in running. The elevator was locked. The guards were armed. She walked into the living room, her hands trembling. Silas turned the phone screen toward her. It was a blurry photo of a blonde woman in a suit, walking out of an NSA building. It didn't look like the brunette janitor, but the eyes were the same. "Who is our rogue?" Silas asked. Rowan swallowed. "A dead woman." "The Russians don't think so," Silas said, stepping closer. "They have a bounty on her. $5 million, alive or dead, preferably slow. They just called me to demand I hand over the person who hacked the grid last night. They know it came from my territory." He stopped a foot away from her. "You lied to me." "I didn't lie," Rowan whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "I just didn't tell you the truth. If I told you who I was, you wouldn't have hired me. You would have sold me." "Is that what you think I am?" Silas asked, his voice low and dangerous. "A merchant of flesh? You're a criminal, Silas. You run a crime family," Rowan shouted, the fear finally boiling over into anger. "Why would I trust you? I've been running for 3 years. I scrubbed floors to stay invisible. I was safe until I helped you." "Safe?" Silas laughed bitterly. "You were starving. You were hiding in a hole. I was alive. And now you are a target of the entire Russian mafia," Silas snapped. "Victor Coletti is working with them. If they know you're here, they will come for you with everything they have. They will burn this city down to get to you." Arthur stepped forward. "Boss, if Coletti is backing the Russians, and they want the girl, maybe we give her to them. It buys a truce. We can't fight a two-front war." Rowan felt the floor drop out from under her. She looked at Silas. This was it, the moment he decided her fate. $5 million and peace with the Russians, or a war for a janitor. Silas looked at Arthur. Then he looked at Rowan. He saw the terror in her eyes, but also the defiance. She wasn't begging. She was bracing for impact. Silas turned back to Arthur. "Get the car ready." Rowan closed her eyes. "He's sending me away." "And call the boys," Silas continued. "All of them. Lock down the perimeter." Rowan opened her eyes. "We're not giving her up," Silas said firmly. "Boss," Arthur warned, "this is the Bratva." "I don't care if it's the devil himself," Silas snarled. He walked over to Rowan and grabbed her arm, pulling her against his chest. His grip was possessive, ironclad. "She belongs to me. She saved my empire. She saved my life. Anyone who wants to touch her has to go through me." He looked down at Rowan, his eyes blazing with a fierce intensity. "You're not our rogue anymore. You're Rowan Kincaid, or you will be if we survive this." Rowan's heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Silas growled, "that you better get back to your computer, because the Russians are coming, and I need you to blind them while I kill them." He released her and turned to Arthur. "Mobilize the soldiers. War is here." Rowan watched him for a second, her heart hammering, not with fear, but with something new. Hope. And maybe love. She ran back to the office. She had work to do. The war didn't start with a bang. It started with a flicker. It was 2 a.m. The rain over Chicago had turned into a torrential downpour, masking the sound of 3 black vans pulling up to the service entrance of the building. In the penthouse war room, Rowan was typing at a speed that blurred her fingers. "Silas," she said, her voice tight. "Someone is pinging the building's HVAC system. They aren't trying to get in through the firewall. They're coming in through the thermostat IoT sensors." Silas was loading a magazine into an assault rifle. He looked up. "What does that mean?" It means they're trying to override the air filtration, Rowan said, her face pale. They're going to flush the ventilation system with something. Gas. Before Silas could respond, the lights died. Not just the room lights, the emergency LEDs, the servers, everything. The building went pitch black. "They cut the hard line," Arthur shouted from the hallway. "Rowan, switch to battery," Silas commanded. Rowan slapped a key. Her monitors flickered back to life, powered by the backup generators. "I'm locking the vents," she said, typing furiously. "But they have a brute force decryption running. It's fast. Faster than anything I've seen. It's the Russians. They brought their own hacker." Boom. A massive explosion rocked the foundation of the building. The floor trembled beneath their feet. "They blew the lobby doors," Arthur reported, listening to his earpiece. "Hostiles in the building. 20 plus. Heavy armor. They're moving up the stairwells." "They'll be here in 5 minutes," Silas said. He walked over to Rowan and grabbed her shoulder. "I need you to listen to me. There is a panic room behind the bookcase. Go inside. Lock it. Do not open it unless you hear my voice." Rowan looked at him. "If I go in there, I can't control the building. I can't help you." "I don't need help," Silas lied. "I need you alive." "No," Rowan said, shaking his hand off. She turned back to her screens. "You can't shoot 20 Spetsnaz soldiers, Silas. They have thermal optics and body armor. You need an edge." "What edge?" "Me," Rowan said. "I'm not hiding in a box while you die." She opened a terminal window. "The elevators. I can reactivate them. I can trap them. They're taking the stairs." "I know," Rowan smiled grimly. "But I can override the fire suppression system. The tanks on the roof hold 50,000 gallons of water. If I blow the release valves on the 30th floor stairwell—" "You'll wash them down the shaft," Silas realized. "Do it." "I need 2 minutes to bypass the safety protocols." "Arthur!" Silas yelled. "Barricade the door. Buy her 2 minutes." The sound of gunfire erupted from the hallway. The elevator doors dinged, not the main ones, but the service elevator. The Russians had bypassed the lock. 3 men in tactical gear burst into the penthouse foyer. Silas opened fire. The deafening roar of the rifle filled the luxury apartment. Expensive vases shattered. Drywall exploded. Silas took down the first 2, but the third man returned fire, forcing Silas to dive behind the marble kitchen island. "Rowan!" Silas screamed. "Status!" "Almost there," Rowan yelled. She wasn't looking at the gunfight. She was staring at code, sweating. "Come on, come on!" The third Russian advanced, pinning Silas down. Then a grenade clattered across the floor. Silas scrambled back. "Grenade!" The explosion blew the kitchen island apart, sending Silas flying into the wall. He groaned, his ears ringing, blood trickling from his forehead. He reached for his gun, but it had skidded away. The Russian soldier stepped over the debris, raising his weapon to finish Silas off. Suddenly, the lights in the room strobed violently. A high-pitched screech erupted from the hidden speakers in the walls, a sonic frequency feedback loop Rowan had just triggered. The soldier flinched, clutching his ears. In that split second of distraction, Rowan didn't hide. She didn't scream. She grabbed the heavy bottle of Macallan 25 from the desk and threw it. It smashed against the soldier's helmet, drenching him in alcohol and glass. He turned toward her, raising his gun. Silas didn't hesitate. He lunged from the floor, tackling the soldier at the knees. They crashed to the ground, wrestling for the weapon. Silas pulled a combat knife from his boot and ended the fight in one brutal motion. Silas stood up, heaving for breath, covered in dust and blood. He looked at Rowan. She was standing by her desk, trembling, but her hand was hovering over the enter key. "The stairwell," she gasped. "They're on the 58th floor." She hit the key. Clunk whoosh. Through the thick walls of the penthouse, they heard a deep, rumbling roar, like a dam breaking. Then, distant screams. The 50,000 gallons of water from the roof tanks had been released instantly into the stairwell, creating a tidal wave that swept the remaining assault team back down to the lobby in a torrent of crushing water and debris. Silence returned to the penthouse. Silas limped over to the window. Down below, emergency sirens were wailing. The police were finally arriving. The Coletti Russian assault had failed. He turned to Rowan. She looked small in the center of the chaotic room, surrounded by shattered glass. "You didn't go to the panic room," Silas said softly. "I told you," Rowan whispered, her adrenaline crashing. "I'm not a liability." Silas crossed the room in 3 strides. He didn't care about the blood on his shirt or the glass on the floor. He grabbed her face with both hands and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, fueled by survival and raw, terrifying emotion. Rowan melted into him, gripping his lapels. For the first time in years, she wasn't running. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "You're right," he murmured. "You're not a liability. You're the queen." It took exactly 14 days for the scars on the Kincaid Tower to fade, at least superficially. The shattered ballistic glass in the lobby had been replaced with reinforced panes twice as thick. The drywall in the penthouse, riddled with bullet holes, had been plastered, painted, and covered with imported silk wallpaper. To the outside world, Kincaid Logistics was back to business as usual. But for Rowan O'Neill, the world had tilted on its axis. She walked through the revolving brass doors at 8 a.m. sharp. The last time she had entered this lobby, she had been wearing stained grey coveralls that smelled of industrial bleach, keeping her head down to avoid eye contact. Today, her chin was held high. She wore a tailored navy power suit that hugged her frame, paired with cream-colored stiletto heels that clicked rhythmically against the marble floor, a sound of authority, not servitude. Her hair, once hidden in a messy bun, cascaded in loose, glossy waves over her shoulders. Frank, the newly promoted head of security, was standing by the desk. He stiffened as she approached. He remembered the mop bucket, but he also remembered the rumors that this woman had flooded a stairwell and blinded a Spetsnaz kill team to save the boss. "Good morning, Miss O'Neill," Frank said, his voice holding a mixture of respect and genuine fear. "Morning, Frank," Rowan replied coolly. She didn't check in at the desk. She walked straight to the private elevator bank, the one previously reserved solely for Silas Kincaid. She pressed her thumb against the biometric scanner. The light turned green instantly. As the elevator ascended silently toward the clouds, Rowan watched the floor numbers tick upward. With every passing floor, she felt the ghost of her old life falling away. Roger was dead. The janitor was gone. What remained was something forged in fire. The doors slid open on the executive floor. The hallway, once a place of terror for her, was now her domain. The scent of sandalwood and ozone lingered in the air. She walked past the main reception, noting the changes. The conference room adjacent to Silas's office, the war room, had been gutted and remodeled in record time. The frosted glass door now bore a sleek, brushed steel nameplate. Rowan O'Neill, Chief Information Officer. She didn't go into her office, though. She went straight to the heavy mahogany doors at the end of the hall. She didn't knock. She pushed them open. Silas Kincaid was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to the room, looking out over the sprawling grey grid of Chicago. He was on the phone, his posture rigid, radiating that familiar predatory energy. He looked healed. The brutal cuts on his face from the grenade blast had knitted together, leaving only a faint, jagged white scar near his temple, a permanent reminder of the night the tower fell. If anything, it made him look more dangerous. He sensed her presence before he saw her. He murmured a few final words into the phone and hung up, sliding the device into his pocket as he turned. His eyes, the color of frozen whiskey, swept over her. A slow, appreciative heat kindled in his gaze as he took in the suit, the hair, the confidence. "You're late," Silas said, though his tone was devoid of malice. It was intimate. "Traffic was murder on the I-90, Rowan replied, walking over to his desk and setting down her tablet. "Or maybe I just wanted to make an entrance. Status report?" Silas walked around the desk, leaning against the edge of it, crossing his arms. "The board is cleared. We handed the surveillance footage of the Russian assault to the FBI 5 minutes after the water receded. It was anonymously delivered, of course. The feds raided the Bratva's stronghold in Brighton Park at dawn. They seized everything." "And Victor Coletti?" Rowan asked, her voice steady. "Indicted," Silas said with a grim smile. "Racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, and thanks to your digital trail, wire fraud. He'll die in prison. The war is over, Rowan." Rowan let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 2 weeks. "And the bounty? The Russians put $5 million on my head. Now that they were arrested, is the contract void?" "Not void. Paid." Rowan blinked, confusion knitting her brows. "What?" "I paid the bounty myself," Silas said, casually, as if discussing a lunch order. "I wired $5 million to an offshore account in the Caymans this morning." You paid the Russians?" Rowan felt a surge of panic. "No." Silas stepped closer, invading her personal space in that way that made her heart hammer. "I paid the target. The contract was for Arzirog. As far as the underworld is concerned, Arzirog died in the explosion at the warehouse. Her digital signature was wiped. Her history is gone. The money was a signing bonus for my new CIO." He reached out, his rough thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "The account is in your name, Rowan. You're a very wealthy woman now. You could leave. You could disappear to Bali, buy a villa, and never look at a line of code or a gun ever again." Rowan stared at him. $5 million. Freedom. It was everything she had been running toward for 3 years. She looked at the door, then back at Silas. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the way he was bracing himself for her to walk away. "I'd get bored in Bali," she whispered. "The Wi-Fi is terrible." Silas let out a low laugh, the sound vibrating through his chest. "I was hoping you'd say that." He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a small, black velvet box. Rowan's breath hitched. "Silas, we've been partners for 2 weeks. This feels fast." "It's not a ring," Silas said, his eyes darkening with intensity. "Open it." Rowan took the box. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid. Sitting on the velvet cushion wasn't a diamond. It was a heavy, gold-plated USB drive with biometric encryption. She looked up at him. "What is this?" "The master key," Silas said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. "It contains the private keys to the Hydra protocol, the deeds to the properties, the blackmail files on the judges and senators, the offshore routing numbers. Everything I own, everything I am is on that drive." Rowan stared at the small golden object. In the criminal underworld, trust wasn't given. It was leveraged. No Don ever gave up total control. It was suicide. "Silas," she said softly, "this is dangerous. If I have this, I could destroy you. One command, and I could bankrupt the family." "I know," Silas said. He covered her hand with his, curling her fingers over the drive until she was gripping it tight. In my world, love isn't about flowers or poetry. It's about handing someone the weapon that can kill you and trusting them not to pull the trigger. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. I am placing my life in your hands, Rowan, because you are the only one who knows how to save it. Rowan looked at the drive, then up into the steel-grey eyes of the man who had threatened to kill her, then died to protect her. She slipped the drive into her pocket, right next to her heart. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered against his lips. "The system is finally stable. Why would I crash it now?" Silas smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his face. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her into a searing kiss, sealing the new alliance. Outside the reinforced windows, the city of Chicago bustled on, unaware that the king and queen of the underworld were watching from the clouds, ready to rewrite the code of the city, one line at a time. And that is how Rowan O'Neill went from cleaning up trash to cleaning up the streets of Chicago. She proved that in a world of guns and muscle, the sharpest weapon is a brilliant mind. Silas Kincaid thought he was saving a janitor, but in the end, the janitor saved him. It's a reminder that you never truly know who people are. The quiet person in the corner might just be the one holding the keys to the kingdom. What did you think of Silas's proposal with the USB drive? Was it romantic or just crazy? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And subscribe so you don't miss the next saga. I've got a story coming up about a bodyguard who falls for the assassin hired to kill him. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.